Hey everyone, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel. And in this video we are going to go a little bit in depth into what the Thousand Sons are really known for, and that is their psychic power. And we have two psychic disciplines to choose from. Every psychic in the army has access to both now. It's very little in the way that it was in the previous codex, where certain units could take certain disciplines. We have Discipline of Change and Discipline of Vengeance. As I said, everyone has access except one model, and that is the Zangor Shaman, who only has access to the Discipline of Change. Everyone else has access to both. So we're going to go in depth and take a look at the 18 powers, excluding the ones we get from within the cults. These are the raw powers that we have access to across the board. So let's get straight into it. So first up then is the Discipline of Change. There are 9 powers within this discipline. So although we had 3 disciplines in the last codex, each of which had 6 powers in, we still maintained that number, but just in a reduced discipline number, but an increase within each. So we have Tzeentch's Firestorm, Glamour of Zinc, Doombolt, Temporal Manipulation, Weaver of Fates, Baleful Devolution, my favouritely named Caustic Curse, Empiric, Flux and Perplex. Each psychic power then is split into 3 different categories. That is a Witchfire, a Blessing and a Malediction. So the Witchfire ones put out the mortal wounds, the Blessing ones buff our own units or certain types of units, and the Maledictions basically put curses on our opponents and debuff those significantly. First up then is Tzeentch's Firestorm. It's a warp charge of 6. Now remember, we have a natural +1 to cast, which means we are casting this on a 5+. It is one of these first Witchfire ones. It has a range of 18 inches and your opponent has to be visible to the caster. When you do that, you roll 9d6 and each 6 is a mortal wound. If you cast this on an unmodified 9+, so you can't take into consideration that +1 that you already have, so you can't cast that on an 8+ in effect. We then gain this mortal wound on a 5+ instead. That gives us an average mortal wound output on that unmodified roll of a 9 to 3 mortal wounds for those 9d6. Also returning, because Tzeentch's Firestorm returned from last time, although that has been improved with that 5+ ability, we have Glamour of Zinc, a warp charge of 6. This is a blessing power and affects any of our Thousand Sons units within 18 inches of the caster, and gives it a -1 to hit in both shooting and melee. Temporal Manipulation also returns from the previous codex. It's a warp charge of 5, another blessing power with a range of 12 inches from the caster, and this affects Thousand Sons models excluding vehicles. Now that wasn't an issue last time. We could affect anybody, and once successfully cast, that unit regains a D3 wounds. Weaver of Fates also returns, although slightly different. Warp charge of 7, another blessing power, range of 18. Now notice that these blessing powers don't require line of sight, they just require the appropriate range. This affects all Thousand Sons units, and what we do is we gain a 4+ invulnerable save. The 4++ indicating an invulnerable save in most forums and so on that you might see that written down. Previously though, this was +1 to your save, but now this is just a flat 4+ invulnerable save. And if you go back to my previous video of the spawn bomb, this was a brilliant option to really buff that unit, which has no invulnerable save at all. It's just got a really rubbish 5+ armor save, so this really benefited that type of unit. As it's a Thousand Sons unit, it also benefits vehicles. We go back to Witchfires, and this time Baleful Devolution with a warp charge value of 8. This is a range of 18, has to be visible again to the caster, and the unit has to have 6 or more models in that target unit. What we do here is we roll a number of d6 equal to the result of the psychic test. So we need a 7+ in effect to be able to cast this. So if you roll that minimum amount, you're rolling 7d6. And each 6 that you roll on that multiplier there gives a D3 mortal wounds to that unit. Obviously, the more power that you roll with that, so if you rolled a warp charge of 10 on your psychic test, you're going to be rolling 10d6, giving you far more opportunity to inflict those mortal wounds. Next up is our first Malediction within the Discipline of Change, and this is Caustic Curse, my favouritely named ability. A warp charge of 6, so again casting on a 5+, a range of 18, But notice it doesn't require visibility to the target unit, it's just a flat range of 18. What this does is reduces the strength of all ranged weapons on that target unit by 1. Note that it reduces the strength characteristic of those ranged weapons. So if you're facing a unit of all heavy bolters, for example, that do a flat 2 damage, that will trigger our All Is Dust ability. Next up, we go back to Blessings with Pyric Flux, a warp charge of 5, so an easy cast on a 4+, a range of 12, and only affects Arcana Astartes units. So Cultists and Zangors and so on are not impacted by that, but then equally they're not really going to be worrying about this ability, because what it does is affect our Warp Flame weapons, including the relic version, so our Warp Flame pistol, our Warp Flamers and our Heavy Warp Flamers, and gives them +1 strength to all of those weapons in that unit. The common build at the moment is a lot of rubrics, all with Warp Flamers using Pyric Flux on the Aspiring Sorcerer in that unit, giving those Warp Flamers a base strength of 5. Now there is a way to increase that, which we'll cover in a later video, but strength 5 Warp Flamers with that AP -2 is very nice. And our final one then is Perplex with a warp charge of 7. This is our second malediction in the Discipline of Change. And what we do is we have a range of 24. Again, doesn't require line of sight or anything like that. It's just pure range of the casting unit of that Psyker. And until the start of your next Psychic phase, each time that unit is selected to shoot, units more than 24 inches away cannot be selected as the target of ranged attacks. So a nice little debuff for units that typically sit at the back of the board, blasting away at our units. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Given the size of boards, I'm not sure how super practical this can be, especially if you're trying to get onto those objectives. But yeah, just putting units out of target selection can be pretty special. So we now move into the Discipline of Vengeance, which is basically the Dark Hereticus abilities before, but we've had a few powers that have moved between the disciplines. So if you are a normal Chaos player, playing Black Legion or whatever, expect this to potentially be the list of options that you're going to get in the Chaos Codex. So we have Gaze of Hate, Twist of Fate, Dark Blessing, Presage, Swelled by the Warp, Temporal Surge, Empiric Guidance, Psychic Stalk, and actually probably even better than Cacodemonic Curse is Desecration of Worlds, which just sounds insanely good just on the name, surely. We start with Gaze of Hate, a warp charge of 5, which is one of these shooty Witchfire powers, a range of 18 inches and has to be visible to the casting Psyker. You roll 3d6 and for each 4+, you inflict a 1 mortal wound. Returning from the previous codex but under a new name is Twist of Fate. It used to be called Death Hex. It's a warp charge of 8, so quite high, but casting on a 7+ with our natural inbuilt +1, it makes it an average casting. It's a malediction with a range of just 12 inches, but again doesn't require a line of sight. And what this does is remove the opponent's invulnerable save on that unit. One of the stock go-tos to kill some of those really tanky Terminator-esque type blocks of units. Really handy for character, invulnerable saves and so on. So a very, very common choice of malediction power. Next up is Dark Blessing, a warp charge of 6, another Witchfire power. So we're going to be doing mortal wounds. Has a range of just 6 and has to be visible to the casting Psyker. You roll a d6. If that is greater than the toughness of your opponent, you inflict quite a hefty number of mortal wounds. That's d3 plus 3 mortal wounds. So between 4 and 6 mortal wounds. But clearly a d6 can't be particularly greater than some of the super tough units out there. So anything with a toughness 6 or above, this won't work against it. Next up, again returning from the previous codex but under a new name. It used to be Prescience, it is now Presage. With a warp charge of 7, it is a blessing power with a range of 18 inches affecting any and all Thousand Suns units. And what this does is gives us a +1 to hit in both shooting and melee. A super common ability. You'll see Presage cast in pretty much every single Thousand Suns army and in every single psychic phase. Another one returning with a different name. It used to be Diabolic Strength. This is now called Swelled by the Warp. A warp charge of 6. It's a blessing power with a range of 12, affecting Thousand Suns models. And this is a mega buff to create a beat stick, very commonly used on things like Demon Princes. It gives you +2 strength and +1 attack to your stat line. You can actually make some really nasty Exalted Sorcerers using this as well. There's a few combinations that we'll get to, creating some really cool beat stick, mortal wound outputting, close combat, monstery Exalted Sorcerers. But I'm not a huge fan of that kind of approach because we are just giving away easy character kills for assassination and so on. But there are ways to make your Exalted Sorcerers almost nigh on impossible to charge as well. So we'll get onto some of those combos later. Temporal Surge is next, aka a Warp Time. This is a warp charge of 7. It's a blessing power with a range of 6 inches, only affecting our Thousand Suns infantry, cavalry and beast models. It used to be able to affect everybody, and this was a good one for Magnus previously. And what it does is give you basically a double move. So you can move normally, and then in your movement phase, have this cast on you, and then you can move again. So yeah, Magnus with his huge wings and stuff used to get around pretty nifty with this ability. But unfortunately he is not infantry, cavalry or beast, so we have to be very careful where we pick this. Again, going back to my previous video of the Spawn Bomb, I think that was a really good target, for example, for Temporal Surge, giving that a 14-inch move for those little beasties. A little power that I think might go under the radar a little bit is Empiric Guidance with a warp charge of just 4. So unless you perils, you are going to be casting this quite easily. It's a blessing power with a range of 12 and affects any Thousand Suns unit and gives you plus 6-inch range to your rapid fire and heavy weapons. So putting that on a large blob of Rubric Marines, for example, is going to be quite nice. The ability to still have a unit sat in the backfield a little bit, and most people would think that your bolt guns have that threat range of a 24 inches and might just play to that, and then you pull this power out and suddenly you've got a 30-inch range with your Inferno bolt guns. Could take people by surprise, and as I said, it's a really easy one to cast. Psychic Stalk is a slight exception to the Witchfire Mortal Wound output ability. So it's a warp charge of 5 Witchfire power. Range of 18, you have to be visible to the caster, but exclude vehicles, monsters and characters. You roll a 2d6, and if that is greater than the unmodified leadership of the opponent, that opponent picks a model from that unit and it's instantly slain. So yeah, no mortal output wound, so there can be no saves, no disgustingly resilient or anything like that as far as I can tell. No shrug saves, as people might call it, because it's just a remove from play ability. How specifically useful this could be is yet to be determined for me, because most units will come with like a chaff model or some, you know, ablative wounds if you want within those units. So this is going to be quite good against maybe eradicators, where every model that you kill is quite a good kill. So it's going to be an interesting one to see where you want to place the Psychic Stalk. But again, very low warp charge. You only need 4 to cast it. It's because it's with a +1. But yeah, an instant slain opportunity there. Now, one of my other favourite named powers is Desecration of Worlds. A warp charge of 7, so casting on a 6+. It's a malediction, so we're going to be debuffing our opponent. Range of 24, so pretty effective range, and the target has to be visible. Each time that unit that you're targeting here on a successful cast moves, advances, falls back or charges, you roll a d6 for each model in that unit. Each 6 is a mortal wound. As far as I can tell from the wording, this is not an either-or situation. It's not when it moves, it then suffers the mortal wound and then advances and falls back and everything else is in the clear. This is each and every time that unit does one of those activities. So really handy for units that might have their own double move ability. Gene Stealers, for example, I think have some of these tricks. Anything that's super quick. If they're going to move and then they're going to advance, and they might be able to charge or double move and then advance and charge. There's a few units that have those kind of abilities, and they're typically large units as well. So you're going to be rolling a lot of d6 and you're going to be inflicting quite a lot of mortal wounds. I'd love to hear from people in the comment section if they can confirm in their own minds whether that is each and every phase. I believe it is. I think I have read in various forums and so on that it might only be in one of those phases of the game. I personally believe it's each and every single one. So there we go then, folks. That is a deep dive into the 18 powers that we have available in our magical phase, in the psychic phase itself. So just as a brief summary then, there are 3 types. There's Witchfires, there's Blessings, and there are Maledictions. So basically Witchfire is putting out all the mortal wounds, a Blessing is buffing our own army, and a Malediction is debuffing the opponent. Plenty to pick from. there are some seriously good combos when we start tying this in to pacts, to the rituals, Kabbalistic rituals that is, and various other shenanigans that we're going to get into when we start putting all of this information together. There's some nice little tricks to explore as we get further into this in-depth series. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section below what you think are the most useful powers that we have. I think pretty much all of them are going to be very tasty. Yeah, looking forward to getting some experience with these as well. So yeah, let me know in the comment section what you think. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you all on the next video.